Part 1: The Signal in the Dark. They sent a distress call for reinforcements, then humanity's true monsters arrived. Underscore 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 underscore. The stars above the Velthari Reach were beautiful, even when the war made them ugly. Keth Varen stood at the wide viewport of his flagship and watched one of his own cruisers die. It did not explode in a bright flash the way old war stories described. It simply broke apart, slowly, like a dry leaf crumbling between fingers. The lights along its hull went dark one section at a time. Then there was nothing where a ship had been. He had commanded fleets for 22 years. He had never felt fear the way he felt it now. The Dracorath had come without warning, or rather, they had sent a warning so brief and so arrogant that it amounted to the same thing. 3 days ago, Praetor Sorvaka's fleet had crossed the border of the Velthari Reach and begun burning everything in its path. Orith Station, the largest of the compact's outer installations, was already gone. 2 colony relay posts had been silenced. And now his own defensive line, which he had assembled with everything the Velthari compact could spare, was folding like wet paper. He turned away from the viewport and looked at his bridge crew. They were good people. Careful, trained, loyal. But their faces told him what the tactical displays were already showing: they were losing, and losing fast. The Dracorath fought differently than the compact had modeled. Their fleet did not slow to exchange fire at distance. It pressed. It pushed through pain. They absorbed losses the way a fire absorbs wood, consuming them, getting bigger, getting hotter. The Velthari fought to survive. The Dracorath fought to end things. It was a very different kind of war. His senior tactical officer, a quiet and steady woman named Velsorith, stepped to his side. She did not need to speak. He could read her posture. She was asking him a question she was too professional to say out loud: "How long do we keep doing this?" The honest answer was, "Not much longer." Keth Varen moved to the communication station and stood there for a long moment. He had resisted this. The Velthari compact was old. Proud. They had managed their own affairs for 3 centuries without calling outside for help. To send this signal was to admit something he did not want to admit, that the compact could not handle what had come for it. But then he looked out the viewport again at the place where his cruiser used to be. He gave the order. Send the distress signal. All frequencies. Human-controlled space. The signal went out into the dark. It was a simple message. The Velthari compact was under attack. The Mutual Defense Treaty between the compact and Earth's Consolidated Authority, signed 6 years prior at a comfortable summit where no one had expected to ever actually use it, was hereby invoked. They needed help. They needed it now. After the signal was sent, Keth Varen held a small council in the back of the bridge with his remaining senior officers. They pulled back the fleet, retreating deeper into the inner systems, buying time. As they ran, they talked about what the humans might send. Velsorith thought perhaps a patrol fleet. Humans kept significant patrol fleets along their borders, fast ships, well-armed, capable of showing force. Maybe 6 to 12 vessels. His logistics commander, an older male named Threshovan, thought more likely a diplomatic mission would come first. Humans were fond of meetings. They would want to assess the situation, establish communication with the Dracorath, propose frameworks. He had dealt with human diplomats before. They liked to talk. Keth Varen himself said nothing during this part of the conversation. He listened. He had studied humans more than most Velthari commanders bothered to. They were young, by galactic standards. Their written history barely reached back 4,000 years. They had only been in space for a little over 2 centuries. In the great archive of civilizations, they were practically children. But there was something in the human record that he had never quite been able to set aside. In those 4,000 years of written history, humans had fought each other, constantly, relentlessly, in every configuration imaginable. Small groups against small groups. Nations against nations. Coalitions of dozens of states against other coalitions. They had developed more ways to kill each other than most species developed in twice the time. And then, somehow, they had mostly stopped. They had built something fragile and argumentative and loud called a unified authority, and they had pointed all that old knowledge outward instead. Kethveren had read the assessments from other species who had pushed against human territory over the decades. None of those assessments ended well for the pushers. He told himself this was reassuring. But the fleet kept retreating, and the Dracorath kept coming, and the inner systems of the Velthari Reach felt smaller every hour. On the third day after the signal was sent, a Dracorath gunship intercepted one of the Compact's retreating transports, a medical vessel, clearly marked, carrying wounded from the fall of Orith Station. Kethveren watched the engagement on his display. The transport was not armed. It could not fight. It tried to run. The Dracorath destroyed it anyway. 64 beings had been on that transport. 14 of them were Kethveren's own species. The rest were from the 3 other member peoples of the Compact, beings who had trusted the fleet to protect them. Kethveren stood very still for a long time after the signal from the transport went quiet. Then he went to his quarters and wrote his report to the Compact's High Council. He told them the truth: the Dracorath were not interested in negotiation. They were not interested in borders or treaties or the courtesies that civilized species extended to each other. They were interested in conquest, and they were very good at it, and the Compact's military could not stop them alone. He said the signal had been sent. He said help had been requested. He said they would have to wait and see what came. What he did not write, because it was not the kind of thing that went into official reports, was the small, quiet thought that had settled into the back of his mind and refused to leave. He hoped the humans were as serious as their history suggested. Because if they were not, if they sent diplomats with briefcases and proposals, or a small symbolic fleet to make gestures, then the Velthari Compact was going to be absorbed into the Dracorath Empire, one burning system at a time. He looked out the viewport at the stars of his home space and waited. Out there, somewhere, the signal was still traveling. Crossing the distance between what the Compact had been and what it might become. Heading toward human space at the speed of light, which was very fast. He hoped it was fast enough. Part 2, What answers a cry for help? They sent a distress call for reinforcements, then humanity's true monsters arrived. Underscore 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 underscore. The signal arrived at the human border relay station at 0347 station time. By 0400, it had been forwarded through 3 command layers and placed on the desk of Admiral Leon Graves at Sol Command Center on Titan. Graves read it once. He set it down. He picked up his coffee, which had gone cold, and drank it anyway. Then he pressed the intercom on his desk and told his night aide to begin waking people up. He was a lean man, not tall, with gray at his temples and a face that had not done anything dramatic in many years. People who met him for the first time were often surprised. He did not look like what they expected an admiral to look like. He did not fill a room with his presence. He did not give speeches. He spoke quietly and he expected people to listen, and they always did, because there was something in the way he held himself, some quality of absolute stillness, that made the air around him feel different. Within the hour, the lights were on across Sol Command. Graves did not call a council to debate the response. The treaty was clear. The Velthari Compact had invoked it. The only question was the shape of the answer. He spent 40 minutes with his senior planning staff, asking questions and listening to answers, and then he began issuing orders. The orders were not small. Commander Diane Ortiz was in the middle of her 3rd cup of coffee and a stack of logistics reports when her comm chimed. She was stationed aboard the heavy carrier Enduring Watch, already positioned near the border zone as part of a routine rotation. The message was from Graves directly. She read it, set her coffee down, and began typing. The message had said, "You are the first major asset in position. You are now fleet liaison. More is coming. Keep the Velthari alive until it gets there." She appreciated that he never wasted words. The Enduring Watch was a big ship, nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, carrying fighter wings, marines, support craft, and enough firepower to hold a small engagement on its own. But Ortiz knew it was not enough. Not for what the intelligence summary described. She got on the line with Kethveren's fleet and told them help was coming, told them to keep moving inward and preserve their remaining ships, and then she spent the next 18 hours coordinating the incoming response from the human side. What came through the fold space relay points over the next 72 hours was not a patrol fleet. It was not a diplomatic mission. It was a war formation, assembled with the quiet efficiency of a machine that had been designed for exactly this purpose and had simply been waiting to be turned on. Carrier groups came first, the big ships that carried everything else. Behind them came the destroyer screens, fast and aggressive, layered in overlapping patrol patterns. Rapid assault carriers followed, each one carrying companies of Marines and their equipment. Electronic warfare platforms slid into position along the formation's flanks. Logistics chains stretched back toward human space, fuel, ammunition, spare parts, food, medical supplies, a long tail that meant the fleet could sustain itself for months if it had to. And near the back of the formation, almost quiet in their presence, came the field hospital ships. Ortiz watched it assemble on her tactical display and felt the familiar mixture of pride and gravity that she always felt at moments like this. It was an impressive thing, a human fleet at full mobilization. It was also a serious thing. Sending something like this meant that someone somewhere had made a decision, and that decision was not going to be reversed by a conversation. Sergeant First Class Cole Harmon felt the ship he was on decelerate and knew they were getting close. He was in the lower decks of the Marine Transport Steadfast Commitment, running a final equipment check with the 12 people in his unit. He was not a complicated man. He was 38 years old, had been in the service for 16 years, and had been in 4 deployments across as many different kinds of environments. He knew how to move through a broken ship. He knew how to work in a suit in vacuum. He knew how to keep people calm when things were bad and keep them sharp when things were quiet. That was most of what the job was. Private First Class Nora Finch sat across from him with her rifle disassembled in her lap, cleaning each piece with the kind of steady focus that Harmon recognized from veterans twice her age. She was 24. Second deployment. She did not talk much, which Harmon appreciated. Some recruits talked when they were nervous. Finch went quiet and got careful. Nobody in the unit talked much about why they were going. They all knew. Someone had called for help. Humans showed up when called. That was the deal. Admiral Graves arrived aboard the Enduring Watch 18 hours after the formation fully assembled. He met with Ortiz briefly, reviewed her work, and told her it was good. Then he opened communications with Kethvaren's flagship. The Velthari commander had been expecting, based on the communications so far, to speak with a diplomat. Perhaps a senior liaison officer. Someone who would explain the political dimensions and the human position and the things that would need to be agreed before action could begin. He got Graves. The conversation was short. Graves asked for the current location of the Dracorath fleet. He asked for their last known ship count and class breakdown. He asked where the largest remaining populations of Velthari civilians were, and which systems they were in, and how long those systems could be defended with current resources. He did not ask about post-war arrangements. He did not ask about trade considerations or political outcomes. He asked about the tactical picture, he listened to the answers, and then he said he would be in touch. Kethvaren sat in his command chair for a long moment after the communication ended. Velsorith appeared at his side. She said nothing. She was looking at the tactical display, which now showed the human fleet formation overlaid on the regional map. It was larger than she had expected. Much larger. She had been thinking in terms of 12 ships. The number on the display was considerably higher than 12. The Dracorath detected the human formation's arrival approximately 6 hours after it fully assembled. Praetor Sorvok sent a signal into human-controlled space, the standard language used between military powers when one wished to warn another off. It stated, in formal terms, that this was a Dracorath operational zone, that the compact matter was an internal affair of the Empire's expansion policy, and that the human fleet should withdraw before an incident occurred. The signal was received. A response was logged. The response said the message had been heard. The human fleet did not withdraw. It began moving toward the Dracorath position. Sorvok read the response twice. Then he told his tactical staff to prepare the advance fleet for engagement. He was not particularly worried. He had broken fleets before. He would break this one. He did not know, yet, What he was looking at, Part 3, The Shape of Human War. They sent a distress call for reinforcements, then humanity's true monsters arrived. Underscore 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 underscore. Praetor Sorvok had commanded the Dracorath advance fleet for 11 years. He had fought in 7 major engagements. He had won all 7. He watched the human fleet on his display and calculated, the way he always calculated, ships, firepower, angles, timing. The numbers were not as comfortable as he would have liked. The humans had brought more than he expected. But numbers were not everything. He had learned long ago that the will to press through pain was worth more than tonnage. His fleet would press. The humans would falter. He gave the order to advance. The first thing the humans did surprised him. He had expected them to form a line, the standard posture for a fleet that wanted to project strength while remaining defensive. Instead, they spread. The formation opened like a hand spreading its fingers, ships moving to angles that seemed almost random until Sorvok's tactical officer pointed out that they were not random at all. They were covering every approach vector simultaneously. There was no angle from which the Dracorath could come that was not observed. Sorvok told himself this was a posturing tactic. He ordered the advance fleet to compress into a wedge and drive toward the center of the human formation. The second thing the humans did was go quiet. The electronic signals from their fleet, the communication bursts, the scanning pulses, the coordination traffic that every fleet generated constantly, dropped to almost nothing. This was strange. Silent running in open space meant you were either hiding or you had a different way of talking to your own ships. Sorvok's electronic warfare officer could not explain it. That bothered him more than he let anyone see. Contact happened at long range. Both fleets were firing before they were close. The Dracorath weapons were powerful, heavy particle lances, designed to punch through shields and hull both. The humans took hits. Several of the smaller human ships shuddered and pulled back. Sorvok watched this and felt a small, cold satisfaction. There it was. They could be hurt. They would eventually decide being hurt was not worth it. Then the human response came. It did not come from where he expected. His advance fleet had been focused on the center of the human formation, where the big carrier group sat. The return fire came from the flanks. From positions his tactical display had marked as secondary assets, smaller ships, faster, which had apparently been moving during the engagement while everyone was looking at the carriers. They hit the advance fleet from the sides, targeting drive systems and shield generators with a precision that suggested they had been studying his ship's weak points for longer than this engagement had been going on. Within 12 minutes, 4 Dracorath vessels were dead in space. Sorvok adjusted. He was good at adjusting. He pulled the advance fleet into a tighter formation, concentrating fire, trying to neutralize the flanking ships. The human flankers moved. They did not stay where his weapons were now pointed. They slid to new positions, continuing to fire, forcing his formation to keep rotating and responding. It was like trying to hold water. Meanwhile, the human carriers had not moved. They sat in the center, enormous and patient, absorbing incoming fire on heavy shields and returning steady, methodical fire of their own. They were not trying to destroy his fleet quickly. They were managing the engagement, holding his attention in the center while the flankers worked the edges. At the 40-minute mark, Sorvok's advance fleet had lost 31% of its fighting strength. He ordered a controlled withdrawal to regroup. The humans did not pursue. They held their positions and let him go. He found that almost more unsettling than the fight itself. On the Velthari flagship, Kethvarin watched the engagement from a safe distance on his tactical display. Velsorith stood beside him and said nothing for a long time. Neither did he. There was not much to say. He had understood, intellectually, that humans were capable fighters. He had read the assessments. He had seen the casualty records from the border conflicts of the past century. He had known, in the abstract way that you know things you have not witnessed, that humanity's military was serious. Watching it work was different. What struck him was not the firepower. The firepower was significant, but other species had comparable firepower. What struck him was the patience. The Dracorath fought the way a storm fought, with momentum and pressure and the expectation that the thing in front of them would eventually break. The humans fought the way a river carved a canyon, with steady, relentless, unhurried force applied to exactly the right places over exactly the right amount of time. They did not seem angry. They did not seem excited. They were doing a job. There was something in that which made the fur along his neck stand up in a way that battle danger usually did not. In the lower decks of the Enduring Watch, Gary Sutton was having a very different kind of experience. Sutton was the xenodiplomacy officer assigned to the fleet. He was 41 years old, had a doctorate in cross-species political science, spoke 4 alien languages fluently and 2 more passably, and had never been in a combat zone before in his life. He had spent the first hour of the engagement sitting on his bunk with his knees together and his hands flat on his thighs, breathing carefully and reminding himself that the hull of a carrier this size could absorb a significant amount of punishment. When the fighting quieted, he got up, straightened his uniform, and contacted Kethvaren's diplomatic staff. He reached a Velthari diplomat named Orvith, who sounded exhausted and tightly wound. Sutton introduced himself and said he understood this was not an ideal moment, but that it might be useful to begin thinking about what the situation would look like after the military phase was resolved. Orvith was quiet for a moment, as if deciding whether Sutton was serious. Then he said yes, it might be useful. They talked for 40 minutes about trade corridor frameworks and ceasefire verification mechanisms. Sutton took careful notes. Orvith's voice gradually became less tight. It helped, Sutton had learned, to talk about the practical things. The practical things were manageable. They gave frightened people something concrete to hold. Admiral Graves received the after-action report from the first engagement, read it in 7 minutes, and then went to speak with his tactical staff. The Dracorath had withdrawn to regroup. They would return with more. He was certain of it. Sorvok was not a fool, he would recognize what had happened and he would adapt and he would ask his command for reinforcements. Graves told his staff they had some time, and that they should use it well. He also told Ortiz to make sure the hospital ships were positioned correctly and that the damage assessment teams had everything they needed. 3 human ships had taken serious hits in the engagement. He wanted full crew casualty numbers on his desk within the hour. He always asked about the casualties first. His staff knew this. It was not a gesture. It was just how he thought about the work. Out across the system, the Dracorath advance fleet regrouped in the shadow of a cold gas giant and Sorvok sat in his command chair in silence. His officers were waiting for him to speak. He made them wait a little longer. He was revising everything he had assumed about this engagement. The humans had not fought like a species defending an ally. They had fought like a species that had done this before, many times, against many different opponents, and had learned from every one of them. They were not guessing. They were applying knowledge. He transmitted a request to the Dracorath Home Command. He asked for reinforcements. He told them, in careful and precise language, that this was going to take more than he had brought. He did not tell them he was unsettled. Praetor did not use that word. But he thought it. The princess mocked the human apprentice. Part 4, What the Princess Learned in the Silence. The ship returned to Zethra Prime on a quiet afternoon. There was no ceremony waiting for them. The docking bay was the same as always, loud and busy, full of ships coming and going, full of people who had no idea what had happened in Survey Grid 7-9. The team walked off the ramp and into the station, and the station absorbed them the way large places absorb small things. The debrief happened in a room that most of the team were not cleared to enter. The door was plain and gray and had no sign on it, which was the Academy's way of saying that the room was important. Administrator Levine ran the session. She was a small human woman with gray hair and a manner that suggested she had been delivering bad news and complicated news and news that was hard to categorize for a very long time, and had stopped being surprised by any of it. She listened to the full account. She asked a few questions. She did not react visibly to any of the answers, which was its own kind of reaction. When the session was over, she told the team that the report would be processed at the appropriate classification level and dismissed them with a small nod. Instructor Voen stayed behind. Administrator Levine looked at him across the empty table. He did not break any rule, Voen said. No, Levine said. There is no regulation covering independent research of deprecated archive materials for pre-mission intelligence purposes. There is not, Levine agreed. There is no rule against learning an obsolete communication subband in personal time. No. Voen was quiet for a moment. The Keth used the peer address register, he said. Levine folded her hands on the table. Yes. That register has not been used outside Keth communications in 40 years. Longer than that, actually, Levine said. The last recorded instance was 53 years ago. A xenolinguist named Porter, who spent 11 years living near the Keth border and translating their morning texts. She was given a similar token to the one we have reason to believe they will send. She paused. She never told anyone how she had managed it. We found out after she died, from her journals. The answer was that she had read everything she could find about them and then she had gone looking for what no one else had bothered to read. Voen looked at the table. I rated his threat profile as negligible. You rated his physical threat profile, Levine said. Which was accurate. Voen made a sound that was not quite agreement and not quite disagreement. Dara found Cal in the archive room on the third evening after their return. She had expected to find him there because she had been watching him long enough to know his habits. The archive room was on the east side of the station, down a corridor that most students ignored because the lighting was dim and the temperature was always slightly too cold. Cal was at a table in the back, with 3 documents open in front of him and his notebook beside them. Dara sat down across from him. How are you? She asked. Fine, Cal said, which was not the kind of answer that meant fine, but was the kind of answer that meant I am not going to make this complicated. Dara nodded. She looked at the documents. They were written in Keth, a dense, precise script that very few people had learned to read because the Keth had very few people allowed to learn it. You can read those. Some of them, Cal said. Slowly. How long have you been learning Keth? Cal thought about it. About 8 months, he said. Dara looked at him for a moment. Before you even arrived here. I looked at the Academy's course offerings before I enrolled, Cal said. There was nothing on Keth communication or culture. So I found what I could on my own. He turned a page. The archive has about 800 documents from the Keth expansion period that have never been translated. Most of them are morning texts, records of ships and people lost. I have been working through them when I can. Dara was quiet for a while. Then she said, the Academy is going to reclassify you. Full cadet status. It will be official by the end of the week. Cal looked up from the document. All right, he said. That is all you have to say. Cal thought about it. Is there a statement I need to give? Dara smiled, just slightly. They would like one, yes. He was quiet for a moment. Tell them the archive on level 4 needs attention. 800 documents, untranslated. If anyone has time. Lyrith came to the archive room that same night. Cal heard her come in. Her footsteps had a particular sound, precise and even, the kind of walk that does not apologize for existing. She stood in the doorway for a moment before she came in. Then she walked to the table and stood on the other side of it, looking at the documents spread across the surface. Why the Keth, she said. She did not say it as an accusation. She said it as a real question, the kind a person asks when they genuinely do not understand something and have decided it matters. Cal did not look up immediately. He finished the line he was reading. Then he set the document down and looked at her. Because they were grieving, he said. And grief is a language everyone speaks whether they know the words or not. Lyrith looked at the documents. Her expression was difficult to read. The Vorith were not people who showed their thinking easily on their faces. They were trained from a young age to keep the outside surface controlled. But something shifted in her eyes, a small movement, like something adjusting to new light. She sat down. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she reached out and picked up one of the documents Cal had set to the side, a translated one, with Cal's handwritten notes in the margin. She began to read it. They sat in the archive room for almost 2 hours. They did not talk much. Cal worked through his documents. Lyrith read the translated text slowly, going back over sections more than once. Once she asked Cal what a specific word meant, a Keth term that appeared several times in the morning texts, and he told her, it was a word that meant something like, the space a person leaves behind. She looked at the word for a long time after he said that. When she left, she did not say goodbye. She just stood up and walked out, which was a Vorith way of ending things that did not mean rudeness. It simply meant the moment was complete. Cal watched her go. Then he turned back to the documents. There was still a lot left to read. The princess mocked the human apprentice. Part 5, What the Galaxy Writes Down. A year passed. The academy moved forward the way it always did, new students arriving, old ones moving on, the training cycles turning over like seasons. Cal finished his first full year as an official cadet. He was not at the top of his class. He was not close to the top. He scored in the middle of most assessments and a little below the middle in the ones that required physical strength or speed. He did not seem bothered by this. He showed up every day, wrote in his notebook, spent his evenings in the archive. Things had changed, though, in ways that were hard to point to exactly. The corridor outside the archive room had more traffic in it now. A few students had started coming in to read in the evenings, not because anyone told them to, but because it had become the kind of place people drifted toward when they wanted to think. Greth came sometimes. Syl came often. Even 2 of the Korath scouts had been seen there, sitting quietly with their reading, which was the kind of thing that would have been unusual a year ago. Lyrith had changed in a way that was also hard to name. She was still sharp, still quick, still exactly the person she had always been. But she asked more questions now. Not in the way she used to ask questions, which was the way someone asks a question when they already know the answer and want to see if you know it too. She asked questions the way a person asks something they actually want to know. It was a small difference. The people who knew her noticed it. The message came on an ordinary morning, addressed to Zethra Prime's station administrator. It was a docking request from a Keth vessel. This alone was unusual. The Keth did not often request docking clearance at shared stations. They preferred their own ports, their own space, their own quiet. But what made the station administrator read the message a second time was the name listed in the request. The vessel was not coming for the Academy, or for Zethra Prime, or for any of the political or commercial reasons ships usually docked. It was coming for one specific person. The name listed was Cal's. The administrator forwarded the message without comment. The Keth ship arrived 2 days later. It came in slowly, the way all large things move when they move carefully, with patience and with weight. It docked without drama. The bay went quiet in the way that bays go quiet when something significant is happening and everyone can feel it but no one is sure what to say. Cal was at the dock when the ramp came down. He was wearing plain gray, the standard cadet uniform, nothing added to it. Lyrith stood 3 meters behind him. She had come without being asked, which was the kind of thing she did not explain. Greth was beside her. Syl was there. 2 of the Korath scouts stood near the back of the group, not officially part of it but present. The Keth commander descended the ramp. She was taller than anyone else in the bay by nearly a full meter. Her scales were the color of dark stone and she moved with the particular stillness of a person who does not spend energy on anything unnecessary. She walked across the bay floor and stopped in front of Cal. She was completely still. Cal did not step back. He looked at her steadily, the way he looked at most things, attentive, quiet, without performance. The Keth commander reached into her coat and brought out a small object. It was a piece of hull metal, dark and old, with markings etched into it. Cal recognized the markings. He had spent months learning to read them. They were Keth morning script, the kind written to mark a person or a ship that had been lost. This particular piece came from one of the ships whose coordinates he had found in the archive, one of the 3 vessels that had gone missing in the dead zone decades ago. The commander placed the piece of hull metal in Cal's hands. In Keth culture, a morning token was not given lightly. It was given to someone trusted to carry memory, to hold it and not let it disappear. It was one of the most serious things one person could give to another. The station bay was absolutely silent. Even people who did not know exactly what the token meant understood from the silence that it meant something. The Keth commander spoke. She used the peer address register, the same one she had used the year before, in the debris field. Syl, standing a few meters back, closed her eyes briefly when she heard it. Cal responded. He spoke in the old sub-band tones, the ones he had been learning from the archive documents over the past year. His pronunciation was not perfect. He paused in places, searching for the right shape of sound. But the register was correct and the meaning was clear, and when he finished, the Keth commander was still for a long moment. Then she made a gesture, a slow motion of both hands, carried out with great care. Syl, watching, made a small sound that she covered with her hand. Later, when Lyrith asked her what the gesture meant, Syl thought for a moment. "It is difficult to translate exactly," she said. "Something like, one who walks carefully on old ground. Or, one who is worthy of memory." She paused. "Both at the same time, maybe." The Keth commander turned and walked back up the ramp. The ship stayed docked for 2 hours and then left as quietly as it had come. The bay began to breathe again slowly after it was gone. People started talking in low voices. 2 Academy officials who had watched from a distance were already moving toward their offices, the kind of quick walk that meant they had reports to write and did not know how to begin. Lyrith found Cal on the station promenade that evening. The promenade was a long curved walkway with panels of clear material on one side, open to the view of space. The stars were very clear and very still. Lyrith stood beside Cal and they both looked out for a while without speaking. "I said you were fragile," Lyrith said. She did not apologize. The Vorith did not apologize. But she said it the way a person says something they have been carrying for a while. "You were right," Cal said. "Biologically speaking." Lyrith looked at him. "That is not what I meant." "I know," Cal said. They were quiet for another moment. Then Lyrith said, "What do you call it?" "What humans do." Cal thought about it. Not quickly, he took his time, the way he took his time with most things. "Paying attention," he said finally. "Mostly, it is just paying attention." Lyrith looked back at the stars. She did not say anything else for a while. But she stayed there, standing beside him, looking out at the same view. Cal held the whole token in one hand. It was small and heavy and cold in the way that very old metal is cold. He turned it over once, slowly, feeling the edges of the morning script under his fingers. Then he put it carefully in his pocket and went back to the archive. Level 4. 800 documents. He found his place in the stack, opened his notebook to a clean page, and began.